All right, good afternoon. We've got quite a few people joining us, and we are excited to get this kicked off. I'm going to give everyone a few minutes to get logged in, dialed in. We're going to go over a couple little housekeeping things, make sure everybody knows how to use the chat box, QA box, and all that good stuff. And then we're going to get into the nitty gritty and all the details that we have promised you guys leading up to this webinar. So thank you so much for everybody logging in. Some housekeeping items. This webinar is going to be recorded. So you can expect a follow-up item in an email within the next 24 to 48 hours from us. You'll have the recording. You'll also have this as a PDF. We plan on also giving you guys a good takeaway document. That'll be given out to you guys probably in a week. Again, this is recorded, so you'll be able to pass it along and share it with everybody. But this is a panel discussion. This isn't a normal webinar. We would love interaction from you guys. So to show me everybody knows how to interact, get on that Google, get on the chat box, get on the QA box. We've got football starting September 9th. So tell me, who's your team? Who are you going to be rooting for? I live in Tampa, so I'll give you one guess who I'm rooting for. All right. It has Brady on the team from my side. I got a great new jersey. All right, Eric, really, Eric?
It's all about college football.
All right, looks like we got some people that know how to use that chat box. We've got the QA box up there as well. This is super helpful for me because if you've got a great question, you want to make sure that you ask us at the end. I want to make sure we get to it. That's a really awesome place to put it. Either way, I'm going to do my best to make sure I get through all of that stuff for you. Go Chiefs. I'm really sorry about your loss, but better luck this season. And all right. It looks like we've got quite a few people kicking off here. We're nearing the 100, and I know we had over 300 register for this. So I'm going to be super respectful of your time because we've got a lot of awesome stuff to cover, and I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. Getting this kicked off, the most important part of this is really making sure everybody on this call understands who these folks are that I've got. I've got John, I've got Eric, I've got Carlo, but they really do, command an authority within our industry because of the experience that they bring to the table. So I want to make sure I share all of that with you guys. John Kuntz, he's the CEO of Intrepid USA, and he joins us today representing a leading provider of concierge medical, home health, hospice, private duty, and independent living support. John joined Intrepid USA Services back in April of 2018. And as the company's president and chief executive officer, he is responsible for leading the organization's ongoing growth initiatives with an emphasis on delivering personalized patient and family-centered care. Under John's leadership, Intrepid USA was named the 12th largest provider of home health care services in the country. He is a visionary executive with more than 30 years of diverse experience in the healthcare services, clinical settings, including electronic health records, patient experience leadership in acute care, physician group practice, and home healthcare environments. John received his Bachelor in Science in Business Administration and Accounting and Marketing from San Diego University. Love San Diego. He also graduated from with Business Masters of Business Administration from University of California in Los Angeles. Like San Diego a little better. Additionally, he is a certified public accountant and board certified fellow in American College and Healthcare Executives. And just a little personal perception from me about John, he is one of the most amazing people first leaders that I've had the pleasure of getting to know. And I am just so honored to have you on our webinar today, John. So thank you so much.
Kristen, you're kind. It's great to meet everybody virtually. Thank you.
Absolutely. Also, we have Carlo Perez, the co-founder and CEO of Swift Medical, which is a global leader in digital wound care. Since founding the company in 2015, Carlo has grown Swift Medical to become the undisputed category leader with empathetic AI-powered technology adopted by over 4,000 healthcare organizations internationally. With 20 years of engineering and entrepreneurial experience, Carlo has worked at the forefront of artificial intelligence, machine visioning, and robotics. From his time in research development at Advanced Micro Devices to teaching computer and electrical engineering as a college professor to starting his own tech company, Carlo is recognized as a thought leader, speaker in digital health transformation, artificial intelligence, product empathy, and the innovation economy. Carlo's built an amazing organization with Swift Medical, and I am just super excited that he is such a great leader and he's a great partner of ours here at Can Time. Thank you so much, Carlo.
Thanks for having me, and great to see everyone here today.
And last, but certainly not least, is Mr. Eric Sharber. He is the managing principal at Symmetry. He is bringing in the heat with us on the latest in recruitment and retention. Symmetry is a healthcare consulting company that unites the former Simeon and Black Tree experts services. They approach help to organizations to help be able to raise performance levels and realize revenue potential in a very complex market. Offering a full spectrum of clinical and financial operations services, Symmetry is committed to change in the post-acute industry by bringing true symmetry in business and in care. So Eric is leading up the home health and hospice talent acquisitions at Symmetry Healthcare Consulting, overseeing executive search and non-recruiting services, as well as the recruitment processes of outsourcing, compensation analysis, and even employee satisfaction survey reports. He's developed an extensive network of contacts within this industry niche, and he is passionate about surpassing everyone's expectations from a client perspective and industry, helping organizations deploy better retention strategies and improve leadership development. The folks over there at Symmetry are great partners with CanTime. We are so honored to have you on board with us. Thank you, Eric.
Thanks, great to be here.
All right, now that you know who we've got with us today and who's surrounding us, I thought it might be helpful to do a quick look back at the facts of what is it that we have been through in this past over a year, nearly 18 months, going on 2 years now. What's happened to us from a worldwide, nationwide, industry-wide perspective, even down to our people's most unique experiences. I found this image from Yale Medicine. I thought it perfectly represented the timeline of the pandemic. And while we really all hoped that today, August 2021, as we go into September, that we would be able to say post-pandemic, the reality is that we're still in the thick of it. And with hospitalization rates increasing, and then the battle of vaccinated versus unvaccinated happening, it's not looking like there's too much of an end in sight for this year. So while all of our companies are starting to buckle in, the one saving grace that we have is we do have a ton of lessons learned, right? And that's what we're going to talk about today, is some of the lessons learned. But before we get there, what are the different variables that really are making up the complexity of our environment right now, from a regulatory perspective and from a pandemic perspective? So from a regulatory, we've had a ton of different changes happening, whether that's through EVV, which impacts everyone, PDGM, RCD is going to expand. If that's not enough for you, we've also got the 2022 proposed rules for both home health and hospice coming. And then you layer that with the staff shortages across the board that's affecting everyone. And then you add in the pandemic, the PPE shortage, it's still happening, distribution challenges that we have, new protocols and processes for our agencies and for our providers. We accelerated home care by 10 years overnight, okay? Now we have to also be aware of the staff and patient quarantines that are taking place. We're looking at what does hospital and SNF at home mean to us from a provider perspective, from a solutions perspective. How does that shift our market? And if all of that wasn't enough, then let's talk about the complexity of vaccination requirements and mandates and what that means to your people and the processes. You know, I think when we were doing the prep for this, we had a real wake up call whenever John used the words, are we going to have pressure of care rationing happening? Is that something that we have to worry about as an organization? And I think it is. So going into all of that and really setting the tone, not to be dramatic, but maybe to be a little bit dramatic, you know, we're at a tipping point with people. We've got burnout. We have misaligned expectations between our employees and our employers. Some people are calling this the great resignation, the great exit. And guys, we haven't seen the end of it. This is just the start of it, because people are realizing, what am I willing to accept and what am I not willing to accept from my employer, for my family life, and all of the different complexities that take place throughout all of the things that have happened in the last 18 months. So not to be a doomsdayist, but what can be done about this, right? Oh, that's the good question. That's why I brought Carlo, John, and Eric together today, is because we're going to ask 4 very specific questions to these industry leaders, and we're going to get their stories, and we're going to get their experiences, and most of all, we're going to get their guidance on how to survive what is going to be another difficult year as we look to 2022. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and set the tone here, and we are going to ask our first question. We're going to kick this off to Eric. And Eric, can you tell us, what are some examples of the personnel retention issues that you've experienced in the last 18 months And what have been your actions to mitigate these, whether they've been through Symmetry's perspective or all of the hundreds of thousands of organizations that are out there in our industry?
Yeah, thanks. It's a good tee up. Appreciate all that information. So yeah, I'll come at it from two directions. Certainly, share a little bit of the story of what happened at Symmetry. I think it's probably very similar to all of your organizations. And then from the work that we do with retention strategies and the workforce issues that organizations are having, I'll share just a little bit of a perspective there as well. It was interesting when I think back to when this pandemic started back last March. I think the biggest retention issue we had, or issue with the workforce in particular, was really around communication. And what I mean by that is that, as leaders, many of the folks on this call are leaders, right? We have access to information. We know what's going on within the organization, right? And sometimes I think it slips down a peg or two in understanding that those on the front line don't know everything that's going on like we might know. And that was front and center for us. We made some mistakes, Simeon, in the beginning, where we thought, you know what, we'll give a weekly update to our whole team. This was pre-Symmetry, so I'll say Simeon. We'll give a weekly update to our team and let them know what we're doing, let them know how we're keeping on top of this whole pandemic and taking care of our teams. And, between 1 week and the next week, kind of mid to late March last year, you guys remember it, the world shut down, everything changed. And we waited a week to give an update on what our corporate response was and how we were taking care of our teams. And it was apparent, like all of my partners and I were like, oh my God, that was way too long. And we learned a lesson out of that. It was like, oh gosh, we have to communicate a lot more, a lot better, and really keep focused on the fact that when we're sitting around the table, right? We're sitting at that table having these conversations, there's frontline staff don't know everything. It's how do you communicate in a way with the right cadence, with the right communication vehicles to ensure that every one of your team members knows they're being looked out for. They understand what the challenges they're facing are and how to overcome them, because that really gets down to the basis of how you retain your staff. I mean, it's my opinion, that communication is the number one leadership trait that all leaders need to have to ultimately boil down to retaining staff. So we learned that at Symmetry, or at Simeon, that it was all about really ensuring our team was up to speed on what was going on. That helped. From an industry, though, I'll tell you, yes, I mean, retention issues, we've all had it, we've seen it, especially in the different levels of caregivers. But one thing that I thought was interesting is that I actually, looking back, think that there were some positives that came out of COVID. And what I mean by that is there were some studies done that are saying that employees feel like the culture has improved. In one particular study, in healthcare specific, not home health or hospice, but healthcare, said 80% of respondents felt their culture was better. This was in August when it came out, last August, better since the pandemic started than where it was before. That's great. I always ask why. And it's because all of a sudden leaders realize, hey, it's about our people here. Let's look inward. Let's take care of our team. And so I think that was a real takeaway that we flipped in a moment and changed the way we treated our teams. And our cultures got better. And SHRM actually posted an article just a month or so ago saying overall employee engagement is at an all-time high. Now that said, all-time high was like 45%. So there's a lot that we could actually do a lot better, but moving up from 30%, that's a big increase. And so, I think, yes, huge retention issues, but I think it's caused us to look inward a little bit for the positive,
That's
John,
great.
what do you think? John, you're on mute in case you don't know.
I don't know. That's good. It's interesting. Eric, you said something, the whole idea of this virtualized world, right? And when I first arrived here 3.5 years ago, I viewed this as a hospital with 7,000 patients in it across 18 states with 2,000 people trying to care for them. And how do you create a sense of culture? Because we don't have that nursing station with the strawberry sherbet and the vanilla ice cream that we can go hang out at. And so I started doing virtualized kind of vision things right after I got here. We flipped the organization chart upside down. We made it basically a servant-based model with the patients and the families at the top. And anybody in an organization that touches patients, they're the highest valued resource we have. And all of you that are leading this in home healthcare know this, right? And in the hospice side of the world and in personal care, we aren't growing tons more of these resources. And so one of the things that that the pandemic brought out, I think, Eric, you noticed this, there was more of a sense of it's like we're under siege. And so they bonded together. And a lot of us that have organizations with multi-year history, if you're newer, you have the blessing of shaping your culture from the start. But if you've been around 10, 15, 20, 30 years, I joined an organization with a 49-year history. Believe me, there was a lot of stuff that was folklore that suddenly became legend. And we talk about that folklore training. And that's one of the challenges you have is things that are legend become reality, whether it was meant to or not. So that's something that you guys should be really conscious of to not let folklore and rumor drive the organization. And that's why when the pandemic hit, suddenly rumors everywhere. So we started doing daily town halls. Now, right now, we're back to twice a week. We're getting ready to go most likely right after the Labor Day holiday to once a week. And we may go back to twice a week instead of daily because we're seeing the anxiety level going up tremendously. What's happening in Afghanistan right now is not helping our people because we have a lot of VA population, as you all do. There is levels of depression and PTSD that are hitting these family members that is driving them nuts. This literally just happened, Kristen, since our prep call, right? And I've been on some training calls where I've got staff in tears. We did a culture vision orientation that it was stunning to watch this. And we just had a little quick prayer time. I said, look, if you don't have a vertical tug in your life, hang up now, because HR might call me, right? But I'm just going to have this conversation with you that want to stay on. And it was pretty awesome. And I think being genuine and real is the one thing I would encourage you, and utilizing the kinds of tools and resources that help these people feel supported versus beaten up. That's one of the things is, when we started doing Zoom calls, have your camera on. They were like, I don't want to, right? And I don't want to have my mute button off. And I'm like, look, you're going to see me on the farm. Okay, you're going to see the dogs. I know your dogs are going to bark. The cats are going to be going crazy. It's life. That's okay. And being real and genuine, I think that's the biggest thing I love to see. And I think that Kristen, you've done a great job pulling, Carlo and Eric together with Greg and yourself, because you're all very real people. And I've known you in the industry for 3.5 years now. And that's cool. That's the kind of thing that is making a difference with your teams.
You said two things there that I just have to highlight before Carlo, you step in, is that the real events that are happening in this world that are not necessarily, you wouldn't think are pertaining to healthcare industry, but the global impact of what's going on and the reality of how that impacts every single person that's out there. They're going to do it. It's going to affect them differently, but being aware of that as a leader, that's what makes the difference. And then the second piece was being in tune with your people and doing the things that are going to help them, whether that's through prayer approach or meetings and things like that. Like, very powerful feedback there, John.
Thank you. Eric, you've been helping us a lot with talent, and we just released and changed our policies and procedures manual. We changed it into the Intrepid USA playbook. And one of our 24-year-old nurses that just started with us, she said one of the reasons, she said that freaked her out when it came across the other day. Because she said, I've been here a week, and when your email came out, she goes, that's awesome. I don't mind being coached, but I hate being managed. And it was stunning. Just that simple reframe was amazing impact on this next generation that we're all fighting for them. How are you going to win their heart? That's what you got to do, is figure out a way to win their heart to get them to choose you over us. And it isn't really home health care. We got to get them to choose us in post-acute over the big house at the acute care hospitals and systems or physician practice. Because for years, if you were the best of the best, you went to the big OR. That was really exciting. The world is going to come to us if we embrace it.
That's perfect. Carlo, I'm going to bring it over to you. I want to hear what you have to say about this as well.
Yeah, guys, John, Eric, I think you guys kind of nailed it right. I don't know that this is an industry specific thing. I think what happened really during COVID is this real reconnection pretty rapidly to, well, we've got a business here that we're running, we're all in this together, but then no, we really are all in this together as humans. And so I think this idea of communication, because what would you do with your family members? You would over communicate, make sure that they knew exactly what was going on. This idea of coaching. So John, you kind of brought up, one of the books that I hand around. My team doesn't exactly like when I hand around books, but one of my favorite books of the past few years, a book called $1 Trillion Coach. It's about the life of Bill Campbell. And it's really about this idea of coaching and coachability. And there's one line in there that actually stands at the top of everyone's job description at Swift as a leader, which is your number one job is the well-being and success of your people. And so success, I'll come back to that through other questions here, but absolutely agree. And when we talk about well-being, I think that took on, pre-COVID to post a really different meaning, whereby well-being really meant psychological and mental health and well-being physically, of course. And so that extended, again, whether that's at Swift, we're a health tech company, at your organizations. I think this was a kind of the type of response we've seen across the board. When I think about just kind of the broad industry impacts that we have seen, obviously as a vendor, everyone we speak to is struggling here. We're lucky to work with folk with either single facilities, organizations with hundreds of facilities across 40 states. And just the turnover challenges is obviously well felt by this entire room. I think that we've even heard stories about hospitals that are using their COVID funds to give out signing bonuses, competing against other care settings, and so we're seeing a real Wild West that's happening out there across the care continuum. And I guess just in terms of ways to mitigate, obviously we take a different lens to it as a technology company, but we've really just seen organizations start to move progressively. I mean, John, on our pre-calls, I love this idea of just how you had this kind of remote force culture that you've been building even prior to the pandemic, which I think is obviously shown in kind of the impact of the great work that you guys do. But then, really asking these hard operational questions around, what can we really do to start impacting people's well-being in a different way. For us, that was, okay, really, don't call someone on their vacation, really turn off the email.
Yeah.
I mean, if you got to do it, you got to do it. But, and then when it comes to our the folk that we get to serve, it's how do we reduce pajama time? How do we, reduce anything related to documentation or clinical inefficiency, and ultimately help people feel supported, both personally and professionally. And so anyway, a bit segue away from Chris and what I think the question was, but we've seen some really great and creative things happening through all of our customers, and just happy to support it.
You said something that was, go ahead, Eric. No.
Well, yeah, just two things, one from John and one from Carlo, both. I mean, John, you mentioned the communication strategies and the generational piece. And I just think it's super important for us all to realize, according to Bureau of Labor Statistics, 75% of the workforce is going to be millennials by the year 2025. And so as I was talking about communication, it's not just about talking like blah, 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 but communication, how are you communicating with your teams? Because how a baby boomer communicated with a Gen X person is far different than how a millennial wants to be communicated to, right? And I'm sort of right on the border, so I get it from both ways. And so as you're thinking about this generational mix, how are you setting up your culture to support a society, really a workforce that's going to be majority millennials in just a few years? So that's super important to keep that in mind. And the second thing, Carlo, you were talking about, the top line of your job descriptions, being a leader and whatnot. And it struck me, there was a slide that I saw on LinkedIn or Facebook or something like that. I forget the gal's name who said it, but the quote was, "You're not a leader until you've developed a leader who can develop a leader." Right? And if you start developing throughout an organization, that fosters employee engagement, it fosters culture, a culture of development and putting that importance on a professional growth. And when we're talking about retention, that's where it's at. And so there's just a couple of little follow-ups to you guys' comments. Great stuff.
Really good stuff there. The only thing I'll add to that of Carlo, what you said was the line in the sand between unplugging when you need to unplug, like drawing lines in the sand for yourself. Don't let yourself get overworked. Take the vacation time. Try not to call your employees when they're on vacation time. I'm a big advocate of that, and I really try to deploy that here at Can Time as well. So really good stuff, guys. So we're going into the second question here, and I'm going to kind of shift things just a little bit we're still talking about people, but now we're going to talk about people with the layer of the regulatory changes and the compounding of work and what has happened with PDGM, with RCD, if it applies to EVV, it doesn't really matter which regulatory item we're talking about here, just the combination and the compounding of what that means to everyone and what that means to our staff, what that means to efficiencies. So Carlo, I'm going to ask you first here, what are some of the methods that you have seen deployed to ensure adequate focus in this area, those regulatory focused areas? And what results have you realized as an organization, whether it's through personally there at Swift Medical or through all of the thousands of organizations that you work with as well?
Yeah, no, thanks, Kristen. I'll let John and Eric speak to kind of the broader lens. I think hopefully as the audience knows here, we're focused, predominantly on wound care. PDGM as it came in, made wound care, out of the 12 clinical groupings, wounds presented the highest potential reimbursement opportunity. So there's been lots of changes that we've seen across the industry in recognition of this new clinical complexity, higher delivery costs. And PDGM's put a real focus on it in the industry, as we've seen agencies, coming into the last year, really said, okay, PDGM just dropped. We are going to put a real focus on this. And then all of a sudden, this other thing happened that we've been talking about for 18, 24, I don't even know how many months now. But I think that what we've started to see is that organizations, as they have started to, tackle some of these challenges that we just discussed about underneath the last question, have started to say, okay, well, how do we build out resources to start to address these opportunities? And more importantly, as agencies start to grow, again, as an example, the focus on wound care, the wound care census, how do we start to support our staff as this starts to become a bigger part of our business? Just to kind of give a bit of this I guess the people angle of it, we spend a lot of time just speaking to our customers, and in particular nurses at the bedside. And this is really, when you think about the hardest possible problem for one to solve at the bedside, wound care kind of, rises right to the top. And my mom was a nurse. I had to marry in, my wife's a doctor, but, ultimately, in many ways, you just can't blame nursing staff for, sometimes, being super well-meaning, but not being able to really get all of that right, 10 hours of training their entire careers and, potentially using the wrong products. But ultimately, the challenge is next to impossible. And of course, the outcomes from that are, improperly treated wounds or infection, amputation, and death. And I think that, stepping away from wound care, what I really think is, I guess the angle towards what we have been seeing as regards people is that, nurses, doctors find wound care incredibly hard. This move to higher acuity in the home setting. And what that's really doing is, it's setting up this challenge for that staff. We hear these stories all the time. They're brand new on the job, kind of, a little bit of training, a little bit more training, now that I'm here, but really a lack of support. And ultimately, what we found is that organizations are starting to look to different ways to utilize technology, obviously improve clinical outcomes, increase financial gains, but ultimately kind of in this realm of people, differentiate as an employer. What type of technology stack are we utilizing as an agency that might be attractive, Eric, to your point, to millennials who are going to be, again, the majority of the workforce very soon. And so you're asking for outcomes. I'm not going to sit here and tell this audience that I have a magical number that shows that, wound care management suite is going to increase retention. But, the way that I like to look at it and our team likes to look at it is we focus really tightly on workflow and nursing satisfaction and what takes something off their plate versus putting it on. And for us, for what is basically 1/3 of their day being spent on wound care with an average wound census of about 30%, we can make the days easier. We can improve satisfaction, and we think that that's all part of working towards this idea of how do you help someone know that they're supported and stay in their role and know that that's what management is really focused on. Again, hopefully that's not too self-serving. It's the wound care lens, but super interested in hearing what you guys have to say. Eric, maybe I'll
I'll jump in. I mean, just a couple thoughts to build off on what you said. whether it's PDGM, whether it's the pandemic, right? Whether it's some other regulatory change, there's always going to be challenges in this industry, right? Like whenever COVID is done, there'll be another thing, whether it's hospice, home health, home care, right? So every year we're going to be looking at life through the lens of, oh, geez, now what do we have to get over and what do we have to do? And so, with knowing there's always a challenge, it's my view when you look at it from the people lens is that you just have to make it all about your people, right? And so it gets down to the fundamentals of just educating your staff and ensuring they're subject matter experts on what it is you do. There's statistics out there. There's data that says when an employee is confident in their knowledge of whatever it is that they do, when they're confident in their ability to go execute on their job, they're more likely to stay with an organization, right? And so if you as an organization, again, whether it's PDGM, wound care, this, that, the other, if you give your team the tools they need to be successful in the job that they do, their satisfaction, their engagement level is going to skyrocket, which is going to lead to better retention numbers. That's easier said than done, right? I mean, it's not like a snap of the fingers, let me buy this widget or give you this little device. The widgets and devices are cool, but it's elbow grease, right? It's leadership doing what leadership should. I have a personal belief, I didn't make this up, I heard it somewhere, but I believe it to be true that 50% of a leader's job, right, of all of us that are on this call here, 50% of our job is to be a counselor of sorts for our team, right? To be there for them, to ensure they have what they need to go be successful. The hard part is we don't have 50% of our time to donate to that. So how do you make it work? And it's through empowering the leaders that are below you to keep helping the leaders below them and the ones below them and the frontline staff. But don't lose ground on whatever challenge you're trying to overcome because all of a sudden you're losing staff, right? Focus on your staff, keep your staff. Maybe it's something that takes a little longer to overcome because you're going about it the right way. But when you start losing staff, man, you're going way backwards, right? That's a 2-step forward, 10 steps back. So I guess from my view, it's all about keeping focus on what the most important asset of your organization is, and that's your teams. So, John?
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm watching the chat boxes and it's sort of cool because you're focusing in on the distinctions of leadership, which is great. And one of the things, Kristen, I love about your tools, Carlo, your tools, you give these clinicians a return on time. Because the biggest complaint we have, why we have nurses quitting and going back to physician practice or acute care environments is the paperwork burden's easier. It's not as much of a hassle factor, right? We don't want them copying and pasting stuff. So you have to make a decision to invest in tools. They're going to support your clinicians, give them a return on time. But there's also a little difference. And this is one where I've challenged a lot of folks. When I first came here in the first 3 months, I started taking the OASIS certification courses. Now, I got the lousy thin envelope because I'm not clinical. I'm like an 8th grade anesthesia resident. But I got 50% on my wound care questions, so that kind of got me there. But the fact that I was even bothering to do this, our RN team I'm still legendary, even though I haven't passed yet, but it's on my, my key performance plan for 2021 or 2022 to pass and go ACES certified, because they were like, oh my gosh, you actually know what an M1800 is. You actually understand these codes. And Carlo, your tools are so important because they don't have somebody next door they can grab from the room. They need your tools to help them be better at care because they know when they're in a little bit over their head, they're going, what is that, tunneling? I don't know. Is that I don't know. This is kind of scary. I haven't seen that before. Is that bone? I don't know if that's bone. Wow, this is getting really bad. But this is that active, present, engaged leadership that several of you talked about that makes the difference between them feeling managed versus empowered and supported by the technology that you're investing in as a leader to make that commitment to them.
Yeah. Kristen, I'll add one more thing in there. And I want to step away from wound care as a whole, because I think the general theme in and around what we saw an uptick in adoption around from agencies was really just that. It was this idea that, again, you can use wound care, you can use other things, but when you think about the challenge of being remote, period, not getting to see anyone at all, but obviously you're going to see your clients and your patients. You're in that setting. You are doing something you've been nervous to do, and you just have no one else to turn to. And again, we work cross continuum, so but we do most of our work in home health, and the ability to turn to someone else and get help, and when you're in a facility, that just doesn't exist. And so this idea of being able to, and I think this is a lot of what COVID ushered in, was the idea of, well, how do we support each other remotely? That's really the fundamental uptick in what we've been seeing over the course of the past year, and not even just through technology, but this idea of support as expressed through technology. So that's at least what we've been seeing on our end.
Yeah, I want to just reference one of the comments that came through on the chat box is more team meetings more often, and more than, even if it's just 20 minutes a day or 20 minutes as a catch up at some point in time, and just making sure in that touch point. And then building off of kind of what you said, Carlo, and John, yours was very similar. It was the tech stack solutions and making sure that you have tools that, one, are desirable to the millennials, one that is efficient to being able to document the care, and that's trying to reduce to where it's making work not so hard for them. It makes it more desirable to be able to be effective in the field. But the one thing that I'm going to say, and this was just Faith, that Eric, you said this, but confidence is the most powerful thing in the world. If you have confidence, it's actually something that I just said today and posted about, and giving your people the confidence, and one, trusting as you as a leader, as an organization, that you're going to be there for them. If you can do it, if there was just one thing and you did that, that's going to make a biggest difference, right? Is giving your people that confidence level. So really great takeaways. I'm really looking forward to building this takeaway document off of this. So I'm going to go ahead and click over to the third question. Before we get into the third question here, I'm a storyteller. I like to tell stories. I'll try not to take up too much time with storytelling, but I want to give you a lighthearted example here before we went into this. Everybody here has used GPS before, and I think everybody's heard some of the stories that have went around whenever GPS, people started getting used to using it, of listening to it blindly. I have been guilty of this in other cities where I am not paying attention and I am just trusting my GPS and turning where I need to go. There's been stories, though, where people have driven off a bridge. I swear I haven't done that yet. But it's terrifying, right? That you're listening to technology so in detail that the potential is, oh, where's the critical thinking that needs to take place? And if you layer that thought over healthcare, it's even more frightening, right? And what do you do as a leader to make sure that not only are you deploying the solutions, but that you're deploying leadership skills and you're teaching people to think through this? So that I want to set the tone with. And then, John, I'm going to ask you first, because you, as our CEO of Intrepid USA, leading up the provider side, what level of oversight are you employing to ensure your chosen methods are indeed consistently providing the results that you expect from a solutions perspective, just from a workflow and all of that? So, John,
one of the things we really focused in on was trying to get to KPIs that matter versus a bunch of data that you make people report that is irrelevant. And that because nothing's more irritating than you're giving me 30 things to think about. We just pick what's your top 3. So we pick our 3 and then we go to the next 3. The other thing we started doing is competitive benchmarking. This was phenomenally game-changing for our organization. What we did was we posted all the scores. If somebody had a lousy Oasis Air feedback on their initial stuff, we let them know. Now, we also celebrated the great people that had 100% perfect. They were first on the list, and we heat mapped it with dark green, light green, yellow, orange, red, just like you see on your weather radar. And we posted these scores because everybody in healthcare is generally pretty competitive, and it was phenomenal. So, and then we started changing the benchmarks and ranking them up. And we ended up finding out who the 70 people were that was causing any of the ADR fails, TPE fails, documentation problems. And there was 70. We had, 1,250, 1,300 people active, and 70 people are causing the problems. It was amazing how they stood out, not in a good way. And then we empowered folks to really coach each other up before we had to. So it was okay to say, hey, you know what? You got to do a better job. And we started, you can't tell 2,000 people what to do any day. You can't tell 200 people what to do every day. but you can ensure if you let them know how they're doing, they'll help each other. So that was really having more of an open book management style versus the keep it hidden and not letting people see. Why not? And it's not that you're trying to embarrass them professionally or clinically, but that was a pretty stunning thing, Kristen, that we did that made a huge difference. And culturally, people were like, "Oh my gosh, this is okay. Yeah, I want to help you get better." And if you're lousy, ask somebody who's great. How do they do 100% clean Oasis and you've got a 30% error rate?
I love that. That's the 40X methodology, essentially, 4 disciplines of execution. Huge fan of that. For all of our audience members that are looking for a great book to deploy, that is an amazing one where you're following your lead lag measures and you have your scoreboard. It really keeps everybody honorable about this is what we're shooting for. This is what our goals are. My team is very familiar with that, John. Like that's a great tool. Eric, I'd love to hear from your perspective what you think here on this one.
Right, and so I'll come at it from a different direction, but just to kind of follow up on John's point there, when you're talking about trying to encourage people to do things the right way, I mean, there's that old saying that says, "Without criticism, there's no development." And I think our leaders in any industry, right? There's so many leaders who aren't really capable of being leaders, right? They were never developed to be a good leader. They're just put in a leadership position and say, "Go manage somebody," right? I was there 20 years ago in my first job. I wasn't trained to do it. And this is a little bit of a tangent, but I'm just saying, you know, when you think about developing teams, I think so many folks are really scared to give that feedback that the team members want. And it's not, you've all heard the word constructive criticism. And I was using that, and I had someone who was in a talk that I was giving raise your hand and say, I like the word compassionate criticism. It's like, that's really, really good, right? But the bottom line is without that criticism, how can you improve? I mean, nobody got better at playing a sport by somebody just sitting there clapping and saying, "Great job," right? It's telling them how to do it better, or whatever kind of analogy you want to make. So the criticism piece, compassionate criticism coming from a positive viewpoint, I think that's real important to kind of what John was talking about. And then from an oversight standpoint, if I look at this through the people lens, if we're trying to say, are we getting better with the people part, with the retention part of this kind of question, this thought, there's that old saying that says you can't manage what you can't measure, right? And so how are you measuring whether or not you're doing better for your people? And so I look at it from that standpoint, what can you do? I mean, there's certainly the ideas and things that some of us have done, stay interviews, right? Talking to your team, novel idea, right? Talk to somebody before they quit. Come on, you got to take the time to do it, right? But stay interviews, the town halls like John was talking about, where it's really focused on not an agenda, I'm going to read all this to you, but what do you guys want to talk about? Measure where they're at, get your thumb on the pulse of your organization by doing an employee engagement survey. And it used to be that if you were lucky, an organization would do one of these surveys once a year. And what I'm seeing from my clients is that they've moved that way forward. They're doing it multiple times a year, maybe once a quarter, some even more than that. But leveraging a third-party partner to do that, get real data. Although, big caveat here, if you go out and you do an employee engagement survey and you get a bunch of information about what your team's looking for, and then you don't do anything about it, you're shooting yourself in the foot. You're better off just not doing the survey. But these surveys, when they're done in a confidential way, it allows your team to give you feedback. And I will tell you, I do these all the time. I've never seen a leader look at it and be like, "This is horrible information." Even when there's some real negative stuff there, they look at it and they learn. That's constructive criticism to them. It's how they turn around and make it better. But when you're looking to oversee, am I getting better? These are a few things that you could do, these satisfaction surveys, these town halls, these stay interviews. And then finally, from an oversight standpoint, if we're trying to kind of bring this back to retention, look at your turnover numbers. It's real simple. Look at your turnover numbers. If they're getting better, then you as a leader are doing a pretty good job. If they're getting worse, it's not them, folks. It's us. It's the leaders. So we have to figure out, what are you doing wrong? What can you do better? So, Carlo?
Yeah, no, I'll riff on that, because I think that's exactly it. And both yourself, Eric, and John kind of said it right. We measure again, as a tech company, everything for us is about metrics. We rule, as we say in our world, by the numbers, not by the loudest voice. And so measuring clinician satisfaction is just something we do with telemetry all the time, making sure that they're, finding things better than what it was previously. And we do this really in partnership with the organizations that we work with, because we find that increasingly, I think, John, to your point, you're starting to realize that with new technologies, we have new abilities and ways to start understanding what is actually going on. And I think that this type of expanded work in around measuring, understanding, your benchmarking against other organizations is being embraced in a really rapid way, and in an expanded way, as we even saw prior to COVID. I'll run around really quickly back, Kristen, to one of the things that what you were talking about, the AI piece as an AI and tech company. I think often people are concerned when the term AI comes up. You got a Terminator walking across the screen, and then so our general philosophy around here, one of the things folk probably don't know about Swift is that one of our first investors was actually the founder of Siri, prior to selling to Apple. So and if you ever listen to Tom Gruber's name, listen to him talk, he really talks about this shared view that we have about this idea of augmentation, and how do you augment and partner with and have a clinician think of AI as a partner, think of your GPS as a partner, as opposed to something to just straight up listen to. And then ultimately that leads to this ability, and we say this a lot, to help clinicians practice at the top of their license. And I'll just say that I think that, again, rounding this back to, I think, this idea of support, when we really think about what we do, if you strip everything else away, this is about how do you automate, data collection at the point of care, so that someone like a human's not intended to understand what percentage of tissue exists at what depth in a wound. That's just not something humans are good at. That produces visibility to the organization. And then it all rounds out back to this idea of being able to provide support. And again, I think that, in this context of retention and staffing, this is what we constantly hear about. We get asked all the time, how do we build teams to support folk in the field? And I think it really, part of that is obviously clinical efficiency, efficacy. But the other part of that is just, folk thinking about their people and trying to help them, do the best they can on their jobs.
Yeah, Carlo, it's interesting. You use that term augmented, right? Because we talk about AI, artificial intelligence in healthcare, and I tell people, drop that term. Nobody wants a computer making a healthcare decision. So we talk about, you could use augmented information to support clinical care decisions, get clinical decision support guidance. And then people are like, oh, that sounds okay. Yeah, it's the same thing, but it's not a techie term. It's something that doesn't scare a patient and their family member. They feel supported. Kristen, one last thing. There was a great question on the chat. If I could just address it real quick about how we incentivize folks. Greg, to your point, we made them care champions. The best of the best got to be care champions. We didn't have to spend a bunch of money on it, but you know what? They were so proud. They get a special recognition. They have a special badge. And I know it may sound silly. It's bling, right? And they get some bling, but it meant something to them. And the other thing is that we did that was really interesting is, Eric, you'd said something I want to go back to, is engaging the care team members. Like I said, they have our cell phone numbers of all the leadership. And believe me, there's little angels, I call them, little care angels. Occasionally my cell phone goes off. Now, I don't have the non-custodial parent issue of, okay, you're tattling on the custodial parent, right? But I asked them, have you talked to your coach about this? Well, yeah. Okay, what was the story? Okay, it didn't get resolved. Who'd you talk to next? Okay. They don't quit. They call me as kind of a last resort. And it's been awesome because we've had 2 or 3 go off since May that we saved our end. And as you know how valuable that is, right? That's the stuff that's really valuable and important.
And John, we don't have, and that's because we don't have a recruiting problem in this industry, by the way. We have a retention problem. Right. So by you doing that, you're retaining staff. It's
leadership, coaching, engaging these people, making them feel important. Everybody on the chat thing sees that. You got to get rid of this us versus them mentality. And that'll help, right?
Yep. the companies that are going to win are going to be the ones that really are able to recognize and know that they're hearing their employees. I loved what you said about that they're able to call you up, that it's not a traditional chain of command, and that you should feel shameful for jumping ahead and calling somebody else. Sometimes you just need somebody to remind you, hey, reach out to this person, let's go from here. And that way you're able to save and engage those folks. Eric, what you said, develop your people. I mean, like, put people into leadership positions that don't have leadership experience, and you're going to live in a world of insanity, right? If you put people in leadership positions that don't have leadership experience, that's cool too, but give them the help that they need and develop them. I love what you said too about the employee surveys. And then Carlo, I feel what you said about the alignment of technology, and we are a partner with you. We are not here to replace the decision-making that you have to do from a clinical perspective, from a billing perspective, whatever it is. We are here to partner with you and align. Those are some big, powerful takeaways that as leaders in your organizations, as you deploy new technologies, whether they're with us or they're somebody else, it doesn't really matter, although you should reach out to us. But, you know, I'm just saying, if you take that mindset of aligning, you're going to find yourself in a lot better place with a rollout and adoption of the tools that you're spending a lot of money on. So I'll let that take us into our last question, so that hopefully we have some time for some questions and answers, and really to address some of the comments that we've gotten throughout this. You know, the simple reality of all of this is that I want everybody on this call to win. I want everybody in the industry to win. I really love this industry. I've grown up in this industry. All of these folks have seen me grow up in this industry. I've been here for 17 years. But the fact of the matter is we are not all going to win. Their opportunity is there, but the reality is that some agencies, partner organizations, they're going to rise up to the top, and other ones are going to fall off the map because of their ways. So John, I'm going to pose this over to you to kick us off again. What do you think agencies should be doing to ensure success, or maybe it's the avoiding? And I think we've talked a lot about the people aspect of this, and I know it might feel like, oh, they're beating a dead horse, but it's that important. So John, I'll let you take it away from here.
Yeah, so first of all, you know, put patients first, then put your people who touch patients second. And then the other thing is don't overanalyze problems too much. Fail faster. You know, everybody in our industry, particularly those, because a lot of us have spent time at the big houses, right? The brand names, the whatever other Assus branding name, Encompass, Compassus, Assus, the must be Live Long and Prosper and Klingon or Romulan, right? That the marketing people come up with. They all come in with these hierarchical structures that don't serve the clinicians and the patients well. When you think about how it translates to culture, Eric, it's I manage through people who manage through people who manage through people who manage through people. Not effective, right? And we better be right. So you analyze everything, don't analyze it. Pick 3 things that matter, do those 3 things. Pick the next 3 things once those are on track, but also don't be hesitant to pivot. Also, I think somebody talked about this. If you're wrong, admit it. Particularly if we tried something, we've had some great successes. We've had some spectacular flame out. I call them flaming porcupines, right? Oh, and we have a little award. We actually have a little porcupine that's painted in fire red with their little quills on fire. And the last person that failed gets to give it to the next person that had a spectacular flame out and failure. Right now we're having to ship it because, you know, we're all kind of virtual still, but it's hysterical, the pride that they take and think, thank God I can finally get rid of the flaming porcupine. And it made failure okay. Versus failure means the end of my career at XYZ company, that I'm now off the track towards success. That's to me the biggest thing that the people can do is pivot quickly. Don't think about it for too long. You know, I had a boss that used to be a founder of Home Healthcare of America, and he was also a founding investor in Pixis, right? He said, you know what? He grew up in Mississippi. He said, if you got a lot of frogs to swallow, number 1, don't think about it for too long, and number 2, swallow the biggest frog first. That's where I'd leave it and turn it over to you, Eric.
So I'm going to disagree with you just a little bit, John. But I know you and I know we're coming from the same place. So, you know, you made a comment about, you know, taking care of your customers first and then putting the employees at that very next page. I think the old adage of the customer is always right is wrong. And I think that your team comes first, your staff comes first. It's my opinion, and I've seen it work. I've seen it work personally, like when I was working in a restaurant industry back in the day type thing. When you and we as leaders take care of our team and we put them at the top of the list, take care of your team, they will take care of your customers, right? Your patients, take care of your team. They'll take care of your patients. The outcomes will follow. There's even a book on it called Patients Second, right? Patients Second, that means the team comes first. So I know we're coming from the same spot, John, but that's just, I think it's real important that us as leaders understand that this workforce crisis, everybody always says it's the biggest problem. It's the top of the list. It's the number one challenge the industry is facing. But I feel like it gets pushed down whenever the new shiny object, whether it's COVID, whether it's PDGM, things like that come in. And then the other thing I'll comment on is things that we should be doing to ensure success. Kristen, you talked about there's going to be winners, there's going to be losers. 100% there is. There's not enough talent to go around right now. And so do you want to be one of the organizations that has the talent, or do you want to be one of the losers who ultimately gets gobbled up and consolidated by the winners? And just a little takeaway, biggest thing I could say is focus on developing your own talent. Stop thinking about, I need to find talent from somebody else to pull in. If you could create an environment where you're committed to developing your own teams and building them up, they'll stay with you. There's statistics that say the tenure will be longer if you develop your own team out there. You'll be one of the winners. And not only that, you'll have a line at the door of people who want to come work for an organization where their culture values developing teams and retaining talent. So a few things there just to throw out there for you guys.
That's a fair recalibration, Eric. And actually that is, I agree with it 100%. So I'll give you actually into my next talk on.
There you go.
Well, I was gonna say, guys, I think that we're the page is the same. Just whether you're kind of, ultimately at the end of the day, it is all about the patient. To your point, Eric, the way that you serve the patient is by serving your team. And I think, really when you start to understand those as the two things that can't be detached in terms of ideology, then I think we kind of land all in the same place. Just to the question, Kristen, as a tech company, we were really shy to suggest to any home health agency or folk on the front lines how they should ensure their success. At least from our perspective, this is about, PDGM would have been enough. The pandemic would have been enough, but the outcome for us is just all about thinking long term, and things like as regards retention, signing bonus hard to compete with, but those are one-offs. What are the things that internally we think about? What will help us stand out? What will give us longevity versus just a high that some of our team members will get. This idea of success and confidence would be the second. That's, again, we hear it over and over as we talk to our users. That is what they want the most, is to feel that they're going to get their jobs done. They're going to be able to serve the patients to the highest capabilities, and again, feel confident about it. So Eric, back to kind of what you were saying. And then the last thing I would say to round this out is that this idea of the trend. And I think higher acuity, of course, coming into home health, we're just going to continue to see this. But when we think about the broader trend here, we actually think about at Swift this kind of overall direction of healthcare, and we probably spend an inordinate amount of time thinking about the future at Swift, maybe a little bit too much. But when we think about this fundamental thesis we have, which is that the future of healthcare, when you really think about it, to your point, Kristen, we've accelerated 10 years. The future of healthcare is going to be ushered in by technologies that empower frontline clinicians and agencies to change what healthcare is. And so, to be able to speak here, to be in this room, to talk about being at the front end of this change and how we deliver care literally around the planet is super exciting for us. And so, continuing to kind of move slowly through and alongside of these changes that are leading us to this obvious, end is I guess what I would recommend and what we think about a lot.
Well said.
Yeah, I loved what you said there about empowering the staff to change, empowering your staff to be able to affect change. Why are we all in healthcare? Yes, we love business. Yes, we love taking care of people, but it is to make a difference. It's to affect change. That is why that your clinicians do it. That's why everyone that's in this industry does that. And I think remembering that at the core of it and remembering that about your people is what's going to make the difference. Eric, I totally agree with you, John, about people first, your employees first. Our customers at Cantime even know I've put a huge emphasis on developing our staff here and making sure that they have the tools that they need, because you are right, also dead on with develop the teams that you've got, and make it to where everybody wants to come work for you. And last but certainly not least, the fail faster thing is huge in my house. We embrace that as like, well, what did you fail at today? We talk about that. Sarah Blakely, the CEO of Spanx, huge like spirit animal of mine. That's one of the things that she employs and deploys throughout her teams and throughout our family. Fall on the sword, own it. I fail all the time. We all do, right? We're human. Let people see it. Fall on that sword. Those are some awesome takeaways. I know a lot of people have asked questions. I'm going to get, Linda, you've asked for the readings and all the books and suggestions. I'm going to get a list from Carlo, John, and Eric and myself together. It'll be a part of our key takeaways for that piece. We've covered so much today and we're right at time, but I can't resist asking just at least one question a piece. So I am going to ask everybody a question that's been sent through, and we will follow up with everybody else that has sent through questions and address everyone. Trust me, you're going to hear from us. So I will start with John. I'm going to kick it off with you. How do you balance the employee first dynamic, of taking care of your teams, but also, we are in a business. So balancing those different approaches and making sure that you're still honoring the board commitments, but also making sure your people are taken care of. Where's the dynamic in all of that?
I always quote Sister Irene Krauss, the Daughters of Charity, no margin, no mission, right? I start there with the care team, but then I also talk to them about, we have one of our big core values is reward the doers, right? And we have not done enough in that. We talk about ask why not, work hard, have fun. We're changing it to work smart, have fun, and then rewarding the doers. And I flat out tell our team, we haven't done it enough. So as we recapitalize our business and get new private equity money in, we're working with our private equity partners. And that's part of how we're choosing who we want to have. Because if it's all about them and getting an ROI, instead of understanding how you build true long-term value, we're not their partner, because we want to invest in things that are different, invest in ways where if we hit our EBITDA target, everything over that initial budget number, we should gain share with our team. Why not? Let's plow it back in and let everybody know. And so far, the ones that are winning get it, because they realize, oh my gosh, and we're doing stickier benefits than others that create things for longevity that tie to something that says, how are you going to stay here? So we're rewarding not only the doers, but the stayers, because they can leave and go to a hospital in a major location in Texas competing with us and get a $50,000 sign-on bonus because they lost all their employees because they mandated something they shouldn't have. Well, I guess that's going to be interesting, right? But I hope that answered it quickly, but that's the biggest.
That's great. That's perfect. Carlo, I'm going to bump it over to you, and then I'll wrap it up with a question to you over Eric here in a second. But Carlo, you and I have a lot of empathy on this side of it from the tech perspective, because tech rollouts can be difficult. Can I get an amen? And especially during a time whenever everybody is remote, we've got all these different pressures going on. Tell us how you make it easier and less difficult, like make the process smoother.
Yeah, when we talk about success, we really mean it. It's one of my running jokes. I already said, I had to marry my way into healthcare, but my mom's a nurse, come from a family of nurses. But if you ever see me try to help them set up their email, you realize I am the wrong person to do this job. So we kind of took that lifelong lesson. At Swift, we actually don't employ technologists like myself to roll out software with our customers. The team is led by one of our first clients, actually, Amy Casada. We hire exclusively nurses to that success team who are all wound care certified. They've lived the experience of rolling out software enterprise-wide, and most importantly, empathizing, with workflows, the customer pains, and really making sure that it fits and tracks to success. So really quick answer there, but making deployment, again, to the theme of this conversation about people versus technology is really, I think, what actually we're quite proud of. So happy to talk more about that as
I
anyone
I
else.
love that, Carlo. That's what we do as well. We don't have technologists doing our deployments. We go after the clinicians or users, people that have really experienced the solution. It's a great tactic. So Eric, I'm going to wrap it up with you because I want you to really talk through us. So it's always the question, what are people looking for? What are the professionals looking for in an employer concisely, specifically that millennial generation, because that's the generation that really we're working with right now. So leave us with a few key tips.
Yeah, and actually we have data on this because we ask everybody we interview, what are you looking for in your next employer? So we have thousands, tens of thousands of answers, and there's a number of trends. I'll leave you the couple. One, flexibility. I mean, it's been proven that, especially that millennial generation, if you ask a millennial to get up in the morning, get dressed, drive across town, to go into an office building to do the same job they could have done on their couch, they're going to look at you like you're crazy. Why couldn't I just do that? And I think the pandemic proved that we could be more flexible with time and whatnot than we had in the past. So flexibility, people want to be developed. So, I mean, seriously, develop your team's top performers, people who, like probably everybody on this call, want to develop as a professional. So are you finding ways, whether it's internal, whether it's third-party resources, to develop your teams and everybody, not just your leadership? Are you developing your frontline staff to move up? Succession planning goes from the CEO to the frontline clinician, right? So, develop them. And then the third thing is dynamic leadership. They're looking for dynamic leader. And so I would say to everybody on this call, if you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, I'm not a dynamic leader, you need to do something about it. And the good news is, according to research, only about 20% of the historical leaders, right, whether it's political, military, business leaders, only about 20% are what people would call a born leader. The other 80% of us have to work really, really hard at becoming a good leader. There's no finish line in leadership development. All of us on this call should be doing it every day, reading books, getting mentors, listening to others who have been there, done that, because the better leader we are, the more people are going to want to work with us, for us, and the more capable you are of then developing your teams. If you do all that right, I promise you your turnover numbers will improve. I promise you'll retain the top talent and you will become kind of that employer of choice. All these other challenges and problems go away if you have the best talent in the market. So.
Woo. Can we get an amen out of that? I think everybody on this call can agree. We've got a lot of people still hanging on. So I think we delivered what we needed to deliver on this. I know there's so much more, and everybody that sent through a chat, everybody that sent through a QA, everybody that did attend, and even if you didn't, I am going to follow up with you guys, and you're going to get some follow-up. You're going to get the books. You're going to get everything from this, and we're going to talk through all of the chats that you guys sent through and address all of that. But I just want to say one last time, thank you so much for joining us today. Eric, John, Carlo, thank you so much for joining me today and Can Time on this. We are so appreciative and thankful of all of the insight that you brought to the table. And I can't wait to work with each of you guys more. So thank you all, and have a wonderful rest of the week and a great weekend. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.